Okay, so the training we're going to talk about is lease options. Now, when we talk about lease, there's multiple type of lease options as well. So I just want to kind of touch base. So a basic lease option is going to look something like this. Let's say there's a house, okay, and Joe, the landlord, the owner slash landlord, has this house and he wants to rent it for, let's say the rent is for $1,000. Okay, so the owner wants to rent his house out for $1,000. Most everyone has rented something, an apartment or a house or something like that. And in order to rent something, you use what's called a lease. A lease is just talks about the terms of the rental. It gives the tenant the right to live in the home, to maybe they have the right to decorate it. They may even have the right to paint the walls or something like that. But it's set for a certain amount of time. Let's say a lease typically is 12 months, and let's say it's a 12-month lease, and rent is $1,000. And then over here, we have a tenant. So both the tenant and the landlord sign the lease. And they agree to 12 months and for $1,000 a month. That's a typical lease, okay? So a lease option basically, you're gonna add one more document to this. So we're going to add what's called, I'm sorry about my little drawing here, but this is basically an option agreement. Now, an option, it basically gives the right to purchase the property at a set price, okay? Whatever that is negotiated at. Let's say, in this case, we'll say it's a $100,000. So you can purchase this at $100,000. That's the set price, and the option has a time limit on it as well. So let's say in this case, it's a 12-month option. Now the cool thing about an option is an option gives you the right to purchase something, but not the obligation. Okay, so you're not obligated to buy it. So say in 11 months and you don't like the neighborhood, or you change jobs and you decided not to exercise the option, you're not obligated to buy the house at the $100,000. It just gives you the right to buy the house. So lease option is great, especially for yourself. If you're trying to find an area or trying to find a house, and a lot of times, especially in more expensive neighborhoods, it's easier to rent a property to get a rent or a lease option on something than it is to just purchase it straight out, because it may be harder to get a loan and the financing and stuff like that. So this is what we call control without ownership. There are a couple different type of lease options here I'm going to just touch base on for a second. A lease option is just like that, where basically it's just two parties involved, okay? A typical lease option is just between the owner slash landlord and then the tenant slash buyer. So that's just your typical lease option. Now we have something that's called a lease option assignment, or also known as a cooperative lease option. And a lot of times we call them a cooperative because you're working in conjunction with the owner and the landlord. This is going to look a little bit different here. So it's going to be very similar. You're going to have the owner slash landlord, and then here you're going to have the investor, which could be you. You're actually going in as a tenant slash buyer on this original lease option document, but your goal is to get paid because you're going to find someone to take your place. But the same document you have, which is on here you're going to have your lease and your option. You're basically going to assign those documents to this end tenant buyer for a fee. A lot of times between 3 to 5%. So let's just say the same terms exist. It's a 12-month lease, and it's $1,000 a month. The purchase price is for $100,000, okay? And everything stays the same except for maybe you negotiate up front with the owner that you don't have to pay them any type of fee. Maybe the option is, maybe it's $100, that's it. Okay, but here you're able to assign this whole thing for, let's say, you do an assignment for the option fee, and we'll call that, let's say, $6,000. Out of that $6,000, we know that $100 has to go to the owner. So that means that you get to keep $5,900 out of this option fee from the end tenant buyer. So that's a lease option assignment or cooperative lease option. Sometimes, if this all works right, and you're gonna have a third document, by the way, I just wanna make this very clear. This is called the assignment. So you're assigning this, all three parties. I usually have all three parties sign it. I have the owner, myself, and the end tenant buyer all sign the same document, so they know how much I'm making. Sometimes the owner and the landlord may say, hey, you're getting $5,900, I'm only getting $100. That's not fair. You know, I want more. Okay, so even if you split it 50-50, let's say you collect $6,000, then let's say you give $3,000 to the owner, and then you keep $3,000 instead of that $5,900. It doesn't really matter because typically this would probably be a deal if you did all the marketing and try to find something that this would probably wouldn't even have turned into a deal, but now you just made it a deal. So even if you only make $3,000, then you're fine. You know, if you're splitting it $3,000 and $3,000 from that $6,000 option fee assignment, so you both come out happy. But a lot of times they don't need all that. A lot of times you can negotiate as little as just 1 month's rent. So maybe $1,000, and then you keep the rest. This is the typical way that it works out for me is usually, let's say, give the 1 month's rent to the owner. That's $1,000, and then I get to keep the remaining out of that $6,000 assignment fee. So this would be a $5,000 to me. So that's a typical lease option assignment, or what we call a cooperative lease option. We have 3 different lease options, by the way, now. So we have one we just explained is called the lease option assignment. We have your typical lease option.
I have a question.
Go right ahead.
So, this might be a dumb question, but when you're assigning it, is it different from wholesaling, as in, like, you're not adding that assignment fee to the $100,000 that's being pulled out of the $100,000?
Oh, good question. So typically we negotiate that price. A lot of times we can just bump that on top. We say we're selling the house for $106,000 instead of $100,000, or I will negotiate something from the seller and just have a little bit of room to negotiate. And usually it's $5,000 or $6,000. So maybe we're selling the house for $94,000.
Okay.
You can go either way.
So
you can go either way. It just depends on the price of the home. So we have our typical lease option, where it's just between you and the owner. Then you have your lease option assignment between you, the owner, and the tenant buyer. And then we also have something that's called a sandwich lease option. So if you think about a sandwich, you have a slice of bread on top and a slice of bread on the bottom, right? What's in the middle typically? It's all the meat, right? That's where all the money's made. Sandwich lease option is more of a long-term play, and usually whenever the market's going up, this is a great investing strategy. This is also a great investing strategy if you're going for a longer lease and you're trying to control a property without ownership. And people use these sandwich lease options, and you do not have to assign anything. You can just rent it out like a normal landlord to a tenant if you decide to. But let me show you the beauty of a sandwich lease option. So let's say you negotiate the lease at $1,000 a month, and then you do the option. Now the option is going to be a little bit different because it's not going to be, oh, by the way, this is for 12 months on the, sorry, this lease is gonna go for, well, we're gonna say 60 months, not 12 months now. So we're changing the terms here, okay? So remember this, we're trying to go for a longer term. In some states, you gotta be careful about doing these long-term and sandwich lease options and stuff like that. But let's say we have our lease plus an option of purchase. And let's say we go ahead and say, okay, Mr. Owner, we're gonna go ahead and give you $105,000, which is even higher than Zillow says it is right now. But we have the right to purchase it in the next 5 years, which is the same as 60 months, right? So we're trying to match the terms here, 60 months, 60 months. Cool, very cool. And then let's say we find a tenant buyer. Maybe we'll assign this, or we stay in the middle until our tenant buyer exercises their option. But here's the difference. Maybe the rent is going to be $1,200 a month, and then the purchase price is going to be $130,000 in 5 years. Okay, so let's just do some math here. So this is where we're talking about the meat is in the middle, right? This is the profit. So you have 3 profit centers. Typically you get some upfront money from the tenant. So maybe you collect $6,000 upfront. Okay. And then, so that leaves, and we're buying it at $105,000, right? So that leaves a $24,000 back-end profit. So you get paid up front. You get paid how much per month? $200 extra per month. So $200, let me do my math here. Let's just say they go for 60 months. I'm not sure they're going to, but let's just assume that they're gonna go for 60 months. 200 times 60. So that's $12,000. So now you're collecting $12,000 in cash flow, plus you're getting $24,000. Okay, so let's just add this all together. So we get our $6,000 up front, plus our $12,000 monthly cash flow, plus our $24,000 back-end profit. Okay, now we just made $42,000. Now you turn a regular potential $6,000 deal is all you had at first, but now you're making $42,000. What do you think about that? So we have our lease option assignment, or also known as a cooperative lease option. Then we have our sandwich lease option, where we get paid 3 times, up front, in the middle, and at the back end. Now, all this is negotiable. You can give some of the money to the owner. You know, you can work out something. There's a lot of different ways to negotiate. The key is just open up dialogue. Communicate, disclose everything, and usually you can make it a win-win-win. $42,000 is huge. I mean, if you got just a couple of those, that would make a huge difference. So.